Hi, it's Brian Parker again, and as I promised, I'm here with sort of a weekly update. Don't have much to update, but first of all, I want to remind everyone that last week I had a call for action that we contact the governing board and ask them to expedite their approval process and the posting of their meeting minutes, and I'll explain to you in a minute why those are so important to us. And some of you have done that. I appreciate that. As of today, which is February 18th, 2016, the last meeting minutes that have been posted on the governing board's web page is from December 17th, 2015. So 2 months has gone by, and we really don't have any minutes to review what has been happening. I know that the governing board has been meeting and has been in discussion around various topics because they have responded to some of my questions and acknowledged some things that have transpired. So I would like to see those in the official minutes so that everybody else can see those things as well and make decisions for themselves. One of the things that I want to point out is, something else I want to point out. The Moderators Nominating Committee has put together a list of frequently asked questions. They're up to about 2 dozen questions now. And you can check those out at their webpage or Facebook page. And I'll put a link in the description box below so you can get to those. But I have noticed something, and those questions came out shortly after Liz and I had emailed and had our questions with the governing board. And some of the responses that are in the MNC's frequently asked questions are pretty much verbatim that what we got from the governing board. So I'm thinking that they might have been related. What's not related is how the question is presented in the frequently asked questions list. We asked one question in a very broad, macro way, and then the question got reworded and down to a micro sort of way of asking it, and that's how they answered it. So in some ways they didn't really answer our questions. And let me just point out a couple of those to you. So going way back, and you saw this in our documents that I shared on the Google Drive, we had just sort of asked some general questions about why 4 candidates, how did they get there, that sort of thing. And the response we got from the governing board was the MNC has informed us that all candidates were assessed using the same criteria, and that only those candidates whose qualifications, experience, and other qualities made them likely to be elected would be put forward to General Conference. They have said, they being the MNC, have said that many of the candidates were well qualified, experienced, and possessed the qualities necessary to serve as moderator, but in the end only 4 qualified candidates were brought forward for consideration by the General Conference. We do not know, nor will we inquire why individual candidates were included or not. We believe the MNC performed the task they were appointed to do on behalf of the General Conference. I agree with that last statement. I believe the Moderators Nominating Committee performed the task that they were appointed to do. My beef, if you will, or the areas that are troubling to me are sometimes in the translation between what the MNC has done and where the waters got muddied and some of the actions perhaps totally unrelated to the MNC. So I want to dissect that a little bit again and point out a few things. One of the things that troubled me with this statement from the governing board is this one here. It says they, meaning the MNC, have said many of the candidates were well qualified, experienced, and possessed the qualities necessary to serve as moderator. But in the end, only 4 candidates were brought forward. Many of them were qualified to serve and met all the necessary, it says. So let's just hypothetically say, and I don't know any of this to be true, I don't know what the numbers are, but before there were 4 candidates, and we really should be saying applicants when they're talking here, so it really should be something like they said that many of the applicants were well qualified, experienced, and possessed the qualities necessary to serve, but in the end only 4 qualified candidates were brought forward. Let's just say that during that process, that application process, they kept shortlisting, and before the 4 candidates were announced, they had a short list of however many. According to this, many of those were well qualified, experienced, and possessed the qualities necessary to serve. Big, broad question for the MNC that keeps on getting translated into we can't discuss individuals and specifics. Not asking about the individuals. Big, broad question. How did you go from that short list to the 4 candidates? What of those many candidates who are well qualified, experienced, and possess the qualities necessary to serve, what was the determining factor that you said, well, we have many, or whatever many may be, I'm just going to throw a number out there. Let's say we have 10. We have many who are qualified and have the qualities necessary to serve. What of those many did you decide, what happened where you decided, well, we're only going to put 4? You could have put 5, but why is it that you had many that were qualified and met all the necessary experience and possessed to serve, and you came up with 4? That's the broad question for you. Don't need to know about the individuals. Broad question. How did you go from that short list to only 4, if many of them met the qualities and possessed the experience necessary to serve? Now, the other thing that troubles me in that statement from the governing board is that they go on to say they do not know, will they inquire, and I know they're talking about individual candidates. But what I'm seeing as a trend with the governing board is they don't want to inquire anything about this process. They're just saying, the process was what it was and everything was done and we're not going to look into it anymore. That's troubling. The governing board has oversight in all of this. And by not looking into the process, by not evaluating their own process, by not evaluating any of these perceptions, any of these appearances of conflicts of interest, is very troubling to me. And it's troubling to me for one reason, and that not only are we electing our new moderator at General Conference, we're going to be electing more than half of the governing board at our General Conference. And if this is the precedence that is being set, will our new governing board come in thinking we don't have oversight into these types of things? We should just let all that go and we won't inquire. And will the new governing board also be in this mindset of, well, the appearance of a conflict of interest is nothing to be worried about. We can keep on stepping our toes over into that gray zone every once in a while. We know what others might think that it appears to be a conflict, but we don't care, and we're just going to go ahead and do what we're going to do. That's troubling to me, and that really should probably be the litmus test for your candidates, however many they may be or who they may be, for a governing board, is whether or not they would have done an inquiry into this. It's troubling. So the other thing that's on the frequently asked questions is about the Council of Elders, and did they have influence, and why was this important or not? And I want to address that. So the original question that was asked by Liz and I was, can the governing board and the moderators nominated committee demonstrate that at no time did the sitting elders provide input into the process? Now, the response we got back from them, from the governing board, it says, that, this was a direct quote, that we were concerned that the Council of Elders and senior leadership team influenced the decisions of the MNC and provided guidance requiring required skills and qualifications. Just want to be clear, we asked the process, not specifically any decisions that the MNC made or the guidance on skills and qualifications. And just as the answers in the frequently asked questions of the MNC, the governing board acknowledged that Reverend Elder Don Eastman, who's retired, was consulted. That makes perfect sense. Barb Crabtree, Director of Operations, was consulted. Makes perfect sense. She talks about salary, benefits, that sort of thing. That the Office of Formation and Leadership Development was consulted to make sure that credentials and of the applicants were correct. That makes sense. And that Reverend Onetta Brooks was part of the process because she serves as the governance chair on the governing board and the liaison between the moderators nominating committee and the governing board. But what they failed to point out in both the frequently asked questions and even into the response to Liz and I, is that in February of 2014 at the governing board meeting, the minutes reflect that this is section 4 of the minutes presented by Reverend Onetta Brooks. It's a section on the moderator nominating committee, and I'll just read it to you. It says, all non-recused members have received the moderator's nominating committee document. The committee has talked with Don Eastman in developing it. If you have questions, send them to Onetta. She wants to send a process document to solicit feedback from the Council of Elders. Go back to the original question that Liz and I had. Can the governing board and MNC demonstrate that at no time did the sitting elders provide input into the process? She, meaning Reverend Onetta Brooks, wants to send a process document to solicit feedback from the Council of Elders. They have invited Alyssa Vega Burns to brief the governing board via Skype at the face-to-face. The committee will also have its own website. Barb is the staff resource on that. Regarding the MNC alternate selection, the alternate is a member of the MNC who sort of sits on the sidelines, so they're fully aware of what's going on and then can fill in as an active member should one of the members not be able to fulfill their role during the duration of the process. Regarding the MNC alternate selection, Onetta said that there will be no votes today. They are recommending a modified executive search process. She, I think they mean Onetta, is requesting permission to consult with the Office of Emerging Ministries to help identify candidates. The Office of Emerging Ministries, as you know, is headed by Reverend Elder Darlene Gardner, who is also a candidate for moderator. Back to the original question. Can you demonstrate that at no time did sitting elders have input into the process? She is requesting permission, she being Onetta Brooks, is requesting permission to consult with the Office of Emerging Ministries to help identify candidates. The idea is to have the Office of Emerging Ministries identify up to 4 candidates to fill the 2 appointments, sharing with them the selection criteria. From that list, we would select 2. Cream has said that he would like the MNC to tell us what they want in candidates, stating his desire to support and not disrupt the team building work. He also recommended that we seek input from the full senior leadership team and not just the Office of Emerging Ministries, given that all offices have international and global portfolio. The senior leadership team is comprised of sitting elders, comprised of 2 of the candidates for moderator. Nancy, meaning Reverend Elder Dr. Nancy Wilson, said that they would all participate. Onetta said that she was not opposed to the full senior leadership teams participating and that she expected the Office of Emerging Ministries to coordinate the work given its portfolio. Clinton shared his support for the recommendation. The governing board took a vote of affirmation. That's why meeting minutes are important. It helps jog the memory. Governing board should probably reference them before they address questions when they're asked direct questions. Hey, what did we do? Can't remember, go back and take a look at it. But it's important here. There are so many things that jump out of here. So we'll go back at the beginning of that meeting minutes. It says that all non-recused members, meaning governing board, received the moderator process document. So those who recused themselves, who said, I'm going to run for moderator, I'm putting my application in, they didn't receive the process documents, nor should they, and they voluntarily recused themselves from these discussions and portions of the meeting. But here, because, why do they do that? Because they know that can be the perceived conflict of interest. It can be a perception that they had an unfair advantage. They were getting insight and knowledge before everybody else. Or maybe even were providing feedback on that process that would influence it. So our candidates, or our applicants who were governing board members, had the wherewithal to say, this could be perceived as a potential conflict of interest. I do not participate in this. But our chair of the governance committee and the liaison from the moderators nominating committee and governing board, or governing board to the moderators committee, didn't see it as a potential conflict of interest to solicit feedback from the Council of Elders on the process documents. two of which end up becoming candidates themselves. Not saying, and I truly believe in my heart they had no influence into that, but it's unfortunate for them as candidates now that this appearance of a conflict of interest is brought to light. And you can say, well, don't bring it up, Brian. It's not the point. The point is it was done, and it was done so poorly. And that's why we're asking the questions. And how does this relate to another frequently asked question? There's a frequently asked question that I thought sitting elders could not be candidates for moderator. Many of us thought that. We thought if you're on the Council of Elders, you can't be considered for a moderator. We later learned that, well, no, we mean if any of the new elders couldn't be elders. And maybe in February, it was still ambiguous. And maybe in February, many people, including our governance chair, thought the same thing and didn't see that it would be perceived as a conflict of interest to get feedback from the Council of Elders on this process if, some of those elders were going to run as a moderator, and did not recuse themselves from the process as some of the governing board members who were applying for moderator did. So anyway, many of us thought that they meant anyone who was on the Council of Elders could not become a moderator or could not run. And then we later learned that no, and this was clarified or not clarified in sometime in August of 2014, and the MNC had written a position paper and delivered it to the Council of Elders, or on the direction of the Council of Elders, saying, hey, we think that it will be perceived as a conflict of interest if the moderator nominates these people as elders and they become elders, and then we turn around and one of them becomes a candidate, that might be seen as undue influence or an endorsement by the moderator. Although, in all reality, a whole year has transpired between those appointments and the election, or would have it. So I don't see it. But I acknowledge, and I think it's great that the MNC thought that there could be a perception that there'd be a conflict of interest. Hindsight is 2020, but now the very words that they used to say the new elder should not be able to run can be used to describe the situation we're in today. It says they would like to avoid any scenario that might create the perception of an unfair or biased moderator nomination process, diminish the independent voice of the General Conference delegates, give unfair advantage to a subset of candidates, or otherwise be seen as a signal from the denominational leaders or our current moderator regarding the selection of MCC's next moderator. We could use those words and just say, can you not see how this now applies to when you have a double standard? That some of the members of the Council of Elders are eligible to run and some of them are not, depending on how and when they were appointed or became an elder. Now, if we broaden that out, which is how we should always be looking at these things, and the idea is, well, the moderator is appointing them, therefore giving some endorsement if they became a candidate, we have to remember that the same should apply then if candidates who are on the Council of Elders, regardless of how and when they got there, who hold positions in MCC where they are appointed, hired by the moderator, who's the chief executive officer, and serve in those roles at the moderator's pleasure, how does that not create a perception of endorsement or bias? So we've ventured over into those gray areas again. We have people who recognize, good people with integrity who recognize where an appearance of conflict of interest may be. We saw that with our potential applicants of governing board members who recused themselves from participating in this process, who didn't even see the process documents. We see that with the MNC saying, hey, we think there might be a conflict of interest with the appointment of elders, trying to avoid that, although unfortunately didn't follow that process all the way through to see where that conflict could be. Again, my perspective was that shouldn't have happened. We should have just left it. I mean, I think one of the qualifications and one of the assets for a potential moderator candidate is that they're an elder, or they served as an elder. So to eliminate some of them, it baffles me still. Don't understand it. But they did. They understood that where a potential conflict of interest may be, and maybe it just wasn't thoroughly vetted and discussed. But we also see at times when people couldn't recognize the perception and the appearance of a conflict of interest by sending process documents to solicit feedback from the Council of Elders, if knowing that those elders may potentially be applicants or candidates for a moderator. Maybe the elders didn't know themselves at that point. Maybe nobody knew at that point. But we have the appearance of a conflict of interest. And it's unfortunate that our governance chair could not recognize that in her role. So I go back to the troubling things that the moderator or the governing board had said, that they will not inquire why individual candidates were included or not. You have to ask, would an inquiry or investigation into this entire process shed a poor light on the role that the governing board or some of its members played? We'll wait to see the meeting minutes, see what else has transpired, and that might help formulate an answer to that question. See you next week.